YouTube, it's me again, and I am back with a video about social norms and morality. Now, what inspired this was a video by Hatred42, where he wonders, what is the threshold for morality? What are these things based on? I thought about it for a couple days, and the only thing I could really come up with is there is no actual threshold. A threshold being where our morals come from. What is the basis for them? There really isn't one. Morals are dictated by the social norms. Social norms are dictated by public opinion, which in turn are based on personal opinion. If enough people have the same personal opinion on something, it becomes public opinion. And I'm not going back up the fucking ladder because I just explained my way down it. I'm going to list a few examples of what I'm talking about. I'm going to use 3 examples of things that have been rejected and accepted and back again throughout history as far as morality and social norms are concerned. Now, before anybody gets their panties in a wad, I am not saying that these things are similar in nature. I am only comparing them because they are all controversial issues. They are all things that have gone back and forth across the spectrum of what is considered moral. Okay? So trolls, sit the fuck down, chill out a little bit, and listen. The first topic I'm going to cover is drug use. Think of how drugs were considered in previous generations and how they're considered now, how they're viewed now. They went from being something that was considered a gift from the gods to being a social pariah. Okay, I'm going to use opium as an example here because it's one I know the history of, okay? Now, originally, opium was great. It was used to make warriors fierce for battle so that they wouldn't feel any pain. It was used in religious celebrations. It was used to make sex more pleasurable. Later on down the line, it got turned into morphine. Then it became used for medicinal purposes. Okay? Morphine came at a time when the only thing available to people undergoing surgery was chloroform. Possibly whiskey if there was no chloroform. During that time, it was all moral. It was not immoral to partake in these things. After opium made the leap from morphine and medicinal purposes to morphine and heroin in recreational use is when it became immoral. If people see track marks on you now, you are a junkie. You are not a moral person. You are someone who is an addict, and there is no reason for you to be using those drugs at all. Whether or not you agree with that is your personal opinion. Most of you probably will say that drug use is immoral. And I realize there's a vast difference between heroin and pot, okay? Trust me, vast difference, I get it. I'm just using this as an example, folks. but you get the point I'm trying to make here. If you use drugs now, you're not a warrior becoming fierce for battle. You're not someone who's celebrating a religious rite. You are a junkie. That is the public opinion. For the people that are watching this and are thinking, what the fuck does general acceptance have to do with whether something is moral or not? Public opinion has everything to do with whether or not something is moral. And public opinion on murder. Is murder moral? No. If you lived in a time where vigilantism was the social norm, murder under the right circumstances would be moral. That is what I'm getting at here. The next one I can cover is, and this is the one I was telling the trolls to chill the fuck out about, and not to assume I'm comparing these things to each other, is homosexuality. Once again, think of how homosexuality was viewed in previous eras. Think especially of how homosexuality was viewed in pre-biblical times. In Rome and Greece, all BC, homosexuality was generally accepted. It is well known that many of the prominent figures of that era, and unfortunately I can only use male examples of this because in those times females were not really considered to indulge in sex for pleasure, so I really have to go with men on this one. In those times it was well known, still is well known, that the many men had male concubines. There was nothing wrong with it. It was accepted. Now, in the last 2,000 years, it has become this social pariah. It is a sin. It is immoral. It is wrong. Especially if you think in the last about 50 years. Think of how people viewed homosexuality in the 50s. Think of the propaganda films that came out around that time that compared homosexuality to pedophilia. I've seen those films. They make gay men out to be no more than pedo bears trolling the high schools for impressionable young boys. I think it's hilarious how it's always men that they portrayed in those and never women. Apparently, even in the 50s, it was still hot if two women kissed. Now, today, most people accept homosexuality. There are those, quite a few of them, that still disagree with it. And I don't even know if it's the majority that think it's okay. I'm not really sure. But it's widely accepted that it's not a sin. It's not something to be ashamed of. It's not something to hide. The reason that is because people's opinions change. Morality changes. Social norms change from era to era. It is the progression of the human race and of the mind and of free thinking that make these changes possible. The next example I have is probably one of the touchiest subjects that is around at present. And it's something that has gone from being completely rejected and condemned to maybe not being widely accepted, but it's no longer talked about behind closed doors, and that is abortion. It went from being something that was done with a coat hanger and a bottle of gin to being something that could be done in a doctor's office with no risk to your life. It is the best example that I have of how public opinion affects morality, and how personal opinion affects morality. There may be a time 1,000 years from now where abortion is generally accepted as drug use once was, and as homosexuality was and is now. There will still be those that speak out against it no matter what. But we are moving towards it. Whether or not you think it's right or wrong is up to your sense of morality. It's not a social norm right now. It may be in the future. They progress, they change in the time that you are living in. The reason I picked this particular example is because we are seeing that massive change that is taking place. I mean, do you honestly think that homosexuality went from being something that was well known and understood to being a sin overnight? No. I guarantee you, there were many heated arguments about it. There were, I don't know if they had protests so much as, murders and slayings about it. But you can see what I'm getting at here. We are witnessing a social norm changing in how that happens. Most people are content with changing it via protesting and things of that nature. There are some sick fucks that will murder to keep that social norm from changing. The social norm of abortions are bad to changing. They don't want it to change. Whether or not you agree with them is your individual morality. There is no threshold.